The Milgrim experiment was conducted in the 1960s at Yale University. You learned this fact from your social psychology professor, the beautiful older lady wearing a lab coat who stood in the lobby of the testing rooms at your college. You had arrived with another woman you've never met. You've been trying to catch the eye of your professor for months, not just because of how distracting her cleavage was when she leaned over, but because of the wealth of knowledge this woman had over how the human mind works and is configured. You wanted to explore her mind as much as those tits. So after studying classic experiments like Milgram and Stanford in her class, and she approached you, asking if you wanted to help her redo the Milgram experiment, you jumped to the occasion. Now the day was here, and walking into the room was a confident-looking woman unaware of the experiment. You were playing the role of the plant, pretending to be just as unaware as the other woman, who you learned now is named Tegan, a businesswoman with a nice career. Your professor told the two of you that this would be a study on punishment and learning. You would draw from a hat to decide roles. Tegan pulled first. She identified herself as the teacher in this test, and you looked down at your slip, which also happens to say teacher, though Tegan would never know that. She was always going to be the teacher for this experiment. You enter your assigned rooms for this test. Tegan enters the room with your professor. Lucky girl, you think to yourself, as you enter another room alone. Just a seat and 4 buttons on a table with a speaker connected to the other room. You strap yourself into the chair. As you take your seat, you hear your professor explaining the test. Tegan will ask you questions and you will answer them on the buttons. Tegan is also shown and instructed that if you get them wrong, there is a machine that will send a shock to you. What Tegan doesn't know, though, is that the machine doesn't do anything, that you are fine and in on it. The questions are easy. Even if you didn't know what was going on, you could easily answer them and you avoid any shocks. It's not till a few rounds in that you are meant to purposefully get a question wrong. And it's the first one you get wrong that you realize something is wrong. As she gives you the word pears and you choose the clearly incorrect answer, you feel a zap through your body. You think you must be imagining things as the electrodes attached to your body are fake, or you thought they were. We will be increasing the shock 15 volts now. You hear your professor say over the speaker to Tegan. It's this next shock as you answer another question wrong that you know the shocks are real as you yelp out in shock and pain. It's almost at this point that the experiment as you know it changes. A dividing window that had been shuttered opens up, allowing you to see in the other room and for them to see you. You watch as your professor stands over Tegan and is reaching to turn the machine up again. Tegan looks at you with worried eyes that you look back at her with too. She begins to ask you another question, and according to the plan, you are supposed to get this one wrong too. But the 2 shocks now have left you timid and you choose the correct answer. Your professor stares daggers into your soul as you do. You have gone against what she has told you to do. Another question comes. You don't want to let your professor down, and you choose the wrong answer again. You and Tegan lock eyes again, and she can see the pleading look in your eyes as you brace yourself for another shock. She hesitates to push the button. You see her finger lingering over it. But your professor drops the first of the verbal proddings written for this moment. Please continue, she says firmly, and Tegan hesitates no longer and pushes the button. Another shock jolts your system, electricity running. You strain in the straps holding you down. It terrifies you and you need to get out of this. Something is wrong. Maybe your professor doesn't realize it's actually shocking you. The smile on her face says otherwise, though. Please, it hurts. Cry out to the microphone on your table. But the experiment continues. The knob on the machine goes up another 15 volt again. It's a moment before another question comes through. Tegan is visibly shaken a bit now herself. Please continue, your professor says again, and Tegan continues to pause, staring at you through the glass. Your professor continues to the next prod. The experiment requires that you continue. Finally, Tegan asks another question, and your finger, shaking and trembling, hovers over the right button, but your professor's watching you closely. Your hand drifts over to a different button to choose. The shock that comes is obviously worse than the rest. You bang on the wall, begging to stop. Tegan is fully shaken now and looking at the professor for some kind of input or concern. Isn't this going to do something bad to them? She asks with a trembling in her voice. Professor remains stern and calm with her reply, another pre-written prod. Although the shocks may be painful, there is no permanent tissue damage, so please go on. You can't do another question. You can't take another shock as the knob turns up again, 45 volts higher now than you started. Please, I don't want to keep doing this. You plead to your professor, you plead to Tegan, who is once again looking at the other for guidance. Professor moves in close to Tegan. Hands rest on her shoulders from behind. She leans down close to her and simply says, whether the learner likes it or not, you must go on until she has learned all the word pairs correctly, so please go on. Tegan tries to collect herself with a nod and goes back to the sheet of word pairs. You know this experiment well, and still you are surprised, she continues. At this point, you just want to be out of here. You are learning rapidly that your professor knew exactly what she was doing here today to you. Maybe if you keep getting the questions right, she would eventually get frustrated and call it off. But the next question comes, and in your muddled, shocked state, you press the wrong button by mistake. You freeze as you do, knowing exactly what you did and the pain that is to come. Tears start building in your eyes. Tegan sees them. She doesn't want to hit that button. Professor sees it too. It is absolutely essential that you continue, she says to Tegan, but she's still just looking you in the eyes, frozen in fear. Maybe we stop it for now? It seems unsafe. I'm not sure I can keep this going. Professor continues to be calm and collected. She reaches down and cups her cheek. You have no other choice. You must go on. Tegan gulps and presses the button. Another surge rushes through your body, every muscle tensing up at once from the shock. When this one stops, you are dripping in sweat and sobbing. Professor, please. This is not how this test is supposed to go. This makes her furious. You tainted the result of the test now. Tegan looks confused and looks back and forth between you and Professor. What is she talking about? She asks your professor. Nothing. The shocks make you say confusing things. Press the button again, she demands her. Tegan once again hovers over the button. She won't press it this time, you know it. She's shaking and stuttering. She was such a well put together woman when this started, and now she seems like a scared girl. But Professor's hand places itself over Tegan's and guides the finger down the button. And she holds it down this time. The pain is unbearable, rushing through your body. You are going to black out from the pain, but before you do, you see your professor reaching a hand into Tegan's blouse. It's okay. You can trust me. This is for science, Professor says to her as you fall over.